Hi everyone, this is Kim C, and you're listening to the Year of Underrated Stephen King. I'm a university fiction instructor, and this is my one-woman Stephen King podcast, where I prioritize the King short stories, novellas, and novels that don't get as much attention as they should. When I'm not analyzing a Stephen King title, I'm doing my best to supplement my reader knowledge and broaden my King friend circle with constant reader interviews that bring a lot of insight and assistance to my reader's journey, as well as amplify my personal love affair with King's writing. Ladies and gentlemen, with the fortune I've had this year podcast-wise, I think I'm going to surround myself with some lottery tickets because my jaw is on the floor with this one. My guest today has a PhD from the University of Stirling in contemporary Gothic fiction and hosts the immensely entertaining and educational podcast called Talking Scared, where each week fiction authors celebrate the horror genre and discuss new creative output. When he's not podcasting and hanging out with Ted, the insanely adorable dog, he's hard at work as a freelance writer with several publications in Esquire and The Guardian on book reviews, the horror genre, and Stephen King's fiction. Friends, Neil McRobert is on an entirely new level of Stephen King expert. Neil has read every single Stephen King title and lives in a mid-world plane where deep and dark academia views with fanboy joy to reign supreme and crown him King of the North and King of Stephen King theory. In this absolutely incandescent interview, we learn about a few of Neil's hot takes on King's stories many treasure, but perhaps now require an additional once-over. We observe his favorite Stephen King duo/team, his favorite four-legged King creatures, and riddle of all riddles, what it's like to actually speak to Mr. Stephen King, the living, breathing person. I am absolutely blown away by our conversation, and emotionally, I'm a hollowed-out husk as Neil is the first constant reader interview whose answers have moved me to tears. My guys, it is such an honor to present you all with this hour plus of conversation. You have no idea. But before we get going, just a warning, there are minor spoilers for Under the Dome and Revival, so please make sure you're aware before you progress. They're definitely opaque explorations, but still, just a heads up. Alright, lovies, let's not wait another second. For today's constant reader interview, we have Neil McRobert from Talking Scared. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce this absolutely stellar, incredible guest who has had an incredible year. This is Dr. Neil McRobert. Hello, Mr. McRobert. How are you?
Hello, I'm very well. How are you?
I'm thrilled. I'm really overly excited. So I'm going to try and tamp down my emotions and calm myself. Can you tell everybody out there, I'm pretty sure everybody listening is well aware of what Talking Scared is all about, but just in case, can you let people know about what you're up to on your podcast?
Yeah, I can. And your excitement is very flattering. But also, I find it kind of absurd. But yeah, so right, Talking Scared. It's a podcast in which every week I sort of sit down virtually with I would say, prominent horror author. Sometimes they're quite big names, and sometimes they are what I like to say emerging names. Everyone from sort of some very small presses up to the big five. Big horror writers. We sit down, we talk often about their most recent book, but we also get into their politics, their lives, their histories, and the things that really scare them. It's a kind of, the phrase I use is informed but informal conversation with the people who write your favorite scary stories. That's my elevator pitch.
Oh, beautiful. I love it. And right when I started listening, I was like, okay, this guy's a constant reader. This guy's King knowledge is off the charts. I need to chat with him. So I'm so thrilled to have you in my hot seat today as we talk about being a constant reader, the King books, the titles that shaped us. So I'm going to get us started with my very first question, which is, how old were you when you read your very first King title, and what was it?
So I have this habit of like really overcomplicating very simple questions. So the simple answer to that is I think I read it when I was somewhere around 12, I think. And I've been saying that for years. Oh, I read it when I was around 12. And then today, when I was thinking about the question, I was like, I don't think that's true. I don't think it was my first King book. I think Night Shift was my first King book because I remember it being bought for me for my birthday, and that birthday was my 11th birthday. So I think I read Night Shift, and then I read it, and then I read The Green Mile, and then I read Bag of Bones, which had just come out when I finished The Green Mile, and I hated it at the time because I love it now, but it wasn't ghosts and ghouls and scary clowns. It was about mature things. I was like, well, I don't want this. I want the scary clown in the sewers. But yeah, I think it was Night Shift, the first one, actually.
And did you know King was a scary book author? Is that what drew you to him as a youngster? Or was it just everybody was reading him and you weren't really sure?
No one was reading him that I knew. I was just a really, really macabre kid. The reason I knew Stephen King was because I've told this story before to various people, but my dad, who's a major influence in my sort of creative life, he'll come up more than a few times in this conversation, no doubt. But I remember being on holiday, and for some reason, he was telling me the plot line to Carrie, the movie, and I was obsessed by spooky things. And he was telling me the plot of this story, and I remember being fascinated. And then we had a copy of Carrie in my house that, for some reason, was at the foot of my bed. I didn't read it, and it was a picture of Sissy Spacek looking down, covered in blood through these haunted eyes. I was like 10; it was at the foot of my bed. How that happened, I don't know. My parents were neglectful, and it used to torment me. This picture of Carrie looking at me. So I was aware of King as a scary kind of writer because of that. And then I don't actually know how I came to read Night. I don't know who bought me that book. I don't know what the link was, but I knew he was a scary writer, and I knew about Children of the Corn. That was part of it. I'd heard the plot of Children of the Corn, and I was so excited to read that story. And it's still one of my favorite stories of his. But yeah, it's all a bit hazy.
Very cool. I love it. I like that it's a trail of breadcrumbs into the past. But dang, yeah, that Carrie image that's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot for sure. Are you a constant reader who has read everything? Have you made your way through all of them? Or are there a couple you haven't quite nailed down yet?
I've read everything, every single. Yeah. Well, I've read everything more than once. So I obviously I started when I was a kid, and I read every book that came out. And it's a weird one when you find King in like the mid-90s. That's a weird period to be reading King because his books get pretty wiggy in the mid-90s. So what I was doing is I was reading every book that came out and thinking, this is all over the map. And then I was going back and trying to fill in the gaps. I remember I used to haunt like secondhand bookstops and like market stalls. And I found a paperback King, many of which I've still got my first copy of The Shining that's like fallen apart. And I would go back and read that. And I didn't know enough to realize that the 80s stuff were like the classics and the new stuff were quite different. And so it was a weird journey through. So basically what happened is then a few years ago, I decided it was like a real project. I said to my wife, I'm going to do this thing. And I was almost asking permission to do it. And I sat down and over the course of about 14 months, I read every single King book in consecutive publication order. And I'd read them all before, with the exception of a very select few. I hadn't read Rose Madder at that point, and I hadn't read like the Gwendy books, but I'd read the rest. And I read them all in order. And I tell you, for real constant readers, it's such a cool thing to do because all of the links between his works suddenly start to make a lot more sense when you read them chronologically. And there's also cool things you spot, like the fact that in the first 5 or 6 books, he uses the word heliograph as a verb in every book. And it's like a word he clearly loves. The sun heliographed off the car as Cujo tried to eat Tad and stuff like that. And you spot little linkages like that, and you literally see a man's writing career develop. It's really worthwhile doing.
That's amazing. All the constant readers who have read everything, I'm just in awe. I bow down. And to have done it in 14 months, I mean, that's Incredible.
I can read King faster than Nabil, so the words kind of fly. What have you not read? What have you not read that you think you should have read?
Oh dear, probably the 70s classics. I haven't read Cujo yet. I am just now reading Carrie for the very first time. For the very
Okay.
first time. Yeah, I haven't touched a lot of his more mainstream titles, aside from the big ones, of course. I'm halfway done with The Stand. I don't know what happened there. Once we got to Mother Abigail's in Nebraska, I closed the book and I don't know what happened. I haven't read Cujo, and I really think that I need to. I actually haven't read Night Shift either, so I'm committing
Okay.
a lot of crimes in my King journey just because I started falling in love with these shadow titles that nobody was talking about, and that's kind of where I hung out.
Okay. Do you know how Cujo ends?
I think so. I think so. I think it's like a tragic child death, if I'm correct.
So just sort of prepare yourself for it because yeah, you could tell the man was on a lot of substances when he wrote it because he leaves nothing on the table. He's in a cruel, mean-spirited kind of mood. Prepare yourself. But I can't read that book because I'm an animal obsessive anymore. I don't think I could reread Cujo. Like you know about Ted, my dog. Like he's like show mascot. The reason I kind of get up in the morning these days. And since I got him, I struggle so much with even animal distress. Like really bothers me. And the thought of reading Cujo again, because do we talk about? Is it spoilery? This podcast? Can we do spoilers?
You absolutely can. Go for it.
Okay. Well, I won't spoil Cujo for you, but the fact that like what happens to him and this phrase that because there's bits from Cujo's perspective and there's this phrase that Cujo just wanted to be a good boy, and it's
Mm.
just the most heartbreaking thing, honestly.
That crushes me. As I get
Mm.
older, I notice I'm really sensitive to animal cruelty
Mm.
in King's works, especially. And sadly, Neil, there's a lot of it. There's a
Yeah, oh
lot.
God, yeah. As I've said before, kill as many fictional kids as you want. I really don't care. But just please leave the dogs alone. It's cats I'm okay with, like church, I'm not really that bothered, but like, oh, leave the dogs alone. Yeah.
Agree.
This will come up again in this conversation, no doubt, because I've seen the questions.
I absolutely approve. I host a Stephen King book club with brand new King people. Like these are people who have never read King before, and it's pretty
Mm.
amazing. And I'm having to have these conversations with them. Like, I'm sorry, it's there. So yeah, you're
Mm.
not alone in the dread. My next question is stemming from this vast readership of King. Do you have any King titles that you absolutely love, but you notice that it doesn't get a lot of love, and vice versa? You really dislike a King title, but you realize that everybody swoons over it. And do you fall in any of those categories?
So I think I, generally speaking, follow the common herd with this, generally speaking. So I think Dreamcatcher is an abomination of a book. I think Cell is deeply flawed. Well, it's got a great ending, but it's deeply flawed. But I feel kind of on safe ground there because if Stephen heard this, he hates Dreamcatcher too, right? Everyone hates Dreamcatcher. But there aren't many books that I really dislike that other people like, apart from Christine.
Okay.
I really don't like Christine. And when I was doing my big reread, I just found it such a chore to get. And I love the book, the film rather, John Carpenter's film. Love it. That's another one that my dad introduced me to way too young. Love the film. The book just, if it was a mean 300-page sort of, B-movie pot boiler, it'd be great. But it's like a 650-page hubris trip, and you can see the hubris. You can see it's the point in King's career where I think he got too big for editorial control. Because there's a thing about Christine that he spent a fortune of his own money buying the rights to all these doo-wop 50s rock songs so he could put them as kind of epigrams before each section. And he spent his own money on that. And I'm like, you are a man you've kind of you have sailed away here from editorial restraint a little bit, Stephen, And I think that shows in the expansiveness of what is quite a minor story. I just don't think it works. There's some great set pieces, and Arnie Cunningham is a good character. It just feels like too grandiose a thing for the subject matter. But recently, I've seen loads of people on social media singing its praises. It's had a resurgence from somewhere. I don't know what's caused it, but there's loads of people chatting about it. But yeah, I don't like it. And the other two that came to mind, again, I don't hate these books. I just don't like them as much as most people. Revival, people adore. And I'm like, yes, it's a good story. And again, fantastic ending. But for me, it feels like everything he's done before, small town, coming of age, all of that kind of like young love, all of that kind of stuff. It feels like that, but done at a kind of diluted level. That ending is fantastic, though. But the King cast, they love Revival and go to bat for it. And I feel like that has been quite instrumental in driving its popularity. I just don't see it. And I feel the same about Doctor Sleep. I think Doctor Sleep is I don't know, I just don't love it that much. A few issues with Doctor Sleep. Am I giving too much detail here, by the way? Am I talking too much?
Nope. Get it. Go for it.
My thing with Doctor Sleep is that the True Knot, these kind of nomadic Winnebago driving geriatric vampires, are brilliant villains, but they just aren't given the right novel to do their thing in. So I feel like they're wasted, which is a shame. It's this other thing. It's also Doctor Sleep is up there with Dreamcatcher as one of the worst indulgences of something that I think King does now and again, which is he takes the sort of the story and he takes the conflict of the story and he relocates it in an almost entirely psychological sort of mental landscape. So you get Abra and the True Knot, Rose the Hat, having all these fights in this kind of conceptual mind palace where they're going through filing cabinets of the mind. And there's just a bit where it leaves the real world behind a bit too much. And it just weakened the story for me. And I don't believe that the Danny Torrance of Doctor Sleep is the same Danny Torrance of The Shining. I just don't believe that. They don't feel like the same character. I'm saying like I hate it more than I do because I don't mind the book at all. It's just some people really love it, and I think it's deeply flawed and kind of didn't need to exist.
Wow, I'm fascinated. I'm blown away, and that's a hot take. I love it. I've not heard that before, but that makes a lot of sense, actually. I like what you said about the True Knot being wasted. I think that's brilliant because when I think about the True Knot, they were a large weakness in the book for me. However, if I framed it around them being omitted into something else, yeah, we've got something. That works, actually. Yeah, I'm going to chew on that for a while because, yeah, I remember liking Dr. Sleep, but having issues, especially with the Conchetta, the grandmother part. That was sort of challenging for me. Yeah, the flaws are aplenty.
I mean, with the True Knot, the bit where they, again, kill the kid, the bit where they kill that boy is it in a cornfield or something? That's one of the most horrible scenes King has ever written. I mean, I was like, Jesus, this is even King doesn't go for the throat this much. It's like it's an abhorrent scene. And I was like, oh, this is the True Knot in all of their finery. This is them with their mask thrown off. And they are terrifying because there's something about a kindly elderly person exploiting the fact that we all tell kids that old people are to be respected and we imply they are safe. And then you see them, oh my God, they're monsters and they're exploiting that supposed safety. That's terrifying. But they just seem so neutered for so much of the story.
Very nice. Okay. When Flanagan's adaptation of Dr. Sleep, I'm a big fan of. And
me too.
His scene with the baseball boy, oh my God, Neil, it was so upsetting for me. I have never had this reaction to a scene. I immediately started crying. It was so awful. Awful. Yeah. I agree. I think the True Knot are more layered and more nuanced than I remember. And mixed in with Dr. Sleep, they are overshadowed a little bit.
Flanagan's film is fantastic. I think it's the best adaptation of a King novel since The Mist. I think in the last sort of like 10 to 20 years, it's the single best adaptation. And I had Mike Flanagan on my podcast, and we basically turned the entire thing into a conversation about King. And I think that Mike Flanagan gets him in a way that no one has since Darabont or Rob Reiner. There are three great King directors. Rob Reiner made Misery, Darabont made Shawshank and The Green Mile and The Mist. And now Flanagan is the guy because he took Gerald's Game, which should be unfilmable, and made it brilliant, But the Doctor Sleep, the movie, is so much better than the book. And it's the only time I can say that about King's work. Because the thing about the movie is Flanagan actually makes, well, he said, Rebecca Ferguson plays Rose the Hat, and Rebecca Ferguson is one of the most attractive, sexiest, just wonderful women alive, right? So that's a whole dimension.
Mm-hmm.
But also, he gives that group a kind of pathos that I think is missing a little bit in the book. In the film, you do kind of feel a weird sympathy for them, that they are friends and they love each other and they're losing each other. And if they have to kill this little girl to, save each other, then so be it. I think that's the third time I've kind of talked about child death being permissible. But yeah, I think the film's fantastic, and I think the book is okay.
I love your interview with Mike Flanagan, by the way, and I'm sure we all do. I was really drooling over that one because it is a brilliant King love fest, and I wholeheartedly agree that this guy gets him in a way we haven't seen in a really long time. And I'm so thrilled that The Dark Tower is coming and The Life of Chuck is coming.
Mm-hmm.
I just wish I want him to adapt everything, which I think a lot of us want that. But my next question is kind of pulling from what we were talking about, the True Knot. We've got some villains lurking around, and I wanted to know if you have a favorite or favorites. You can do a top 3, a top 5. I'm open.
So, right. I always have a soft spot for Leyland Gaunt from Needful Things, but I don't think he'd make the top 3 or anything. I think he's just so deliciously kind of evil and funny, and I love that book's kind of like King's Witches of Eastwick. It's something a bit different. I think he's a joy. But I had to really think about this question, and my top, in no particular order, Annie Wilkes from Misery is just one of the greatest antagonists of all time. And the more I read that book, and it's probably the King book I've read the most times, because I wrote an entire chapter of my PhD thesis on Misery.
Wow.
So I've read it probably upwards of 15 times, that book, in every possible way of reading it. And every time I read it, I think more and more that she's just misunderstood.
Okay.
And I think Paul Sheldon is a right prick. I've come to quite love Annie. I think we could be friends, me and Annie. And I think, we'll get into probably talking about King and women as we go along. But, King writes her as, a 6-dimensional character. There is so much going on. She's a killer of children, like an angel of death type Munchausen's by proxy person. She's a caretaker as well. And she does love Paul, and she does love Misery Chastain, and none of it's a lie. And that makes her both more endearing and more terrifying, because you're dealing with authenticity. I think authentic evil, or not even evil, she's not evil, but authentic danger and threats, and someone who really believes in what they're doing is way scarier than someone who is doing it for, a more cynical reason. So that's what makes her she so believes that she's doing the right thing, and it's terrifying. And the weird thing about that book is she represents. So my PhD was in metafiction, so like horror writing that is writing about itself. And my point was that in that book, King is based. I know he says he's writing about addiction and that Annie is coke and all of that sort of stuff. Who am I to argue? But undeniably, he is also taking stock in that book of his own career, and the fact that he's reached a point in his career where he feels so curtailed and confined by the horror genre, just like Paul is confined by romance and the Misery books. He feels, King clearly felt so just confined by horror that he wanted to treat the genre of horror and the readership as a kind of gothic imprisoning thing. Annie Wilkes is genre. She is the reader. She's this demanding, voracious market that wants more and more of what King does, and he wants to break free. But what I find interesting is, as King has got older, he has become way more open to literature and to, realism, and to moving away from genre. So as he's got older, he went towards it and all that kind of wanting to be a great American writer. And he's come back to horror, and he's come back to being like, I am what I am. I like writing genre. Take it or leave it. I don't care. So as he's got older, I think he probably agrees with Annie more now than he would agree with Paul, because he seems to have fallen back in love with the genre. Does that make sense? So I think he's redeemed Annie in his own career.
I'm just drooling right now. Like, this is the part where I stand up and clap, Neil. My God, that's huge. Yes, it makes sense. It's brilliant.
But she's not my favorite villain. My favorite villain is Big Jim Rennie from Under the Dome.
Yes. Oh my God, I love that. Yes. Tell me more.
Well, it's a split, right? Big Jim Rennie or Mrs. Carmody for the same reason. Because I think they are essentially the same, providing the same function. They're showing that in a confined space, under stress, evil can be very, very seductive and very plausible. So for those who haven't read The Mist, Mrs. Carmody is this kind of religious zealot who kind of, they're all trapped in this supermarket type place while shit's going down. And Mrs. Carmody starts talking about blood sacrifice and how it's the end of days. And at first, what seems like a completely ludicrous stance, as pressure is applied to this kettle of a situation, more and more people cross the threshold to agree with her. And Big Jim Rennie in Under the Dome, again, it's a bigger, footprint, but they're still trapped in a pressure cooker as this invisible dome comes into place. And he manipulates everyone's panic and anxiety and their insecurity to his own ends. And I think that they're both providing the same function on kind of like a micro and a macrocosm. And you look at, I know that Big Jim Rennie was based on, not Rumsfeld, what's the other guy called? Cheney, yeah, Dick Cheney. But you look at Trump's entire trajectory, and my God, is just it's just Big Jim Rennie. So I find it plausibly terrifying that these characters have actually been borne out by politics.
Couldn't agree more. Big Jim Rennie, I read Under the Dome during COVID.
Oh, wow.
Right. Poor choice in retrospect. Very poor choice. But I had such rage in my body reading that book. And he is alive, of course, the whole time. Hundreds and hundreds of pages of Jim Rennie. I just was gritting my teeth. I had a physical reaction to how much I hated that character. And that's brilliant. It's just brilliant with how real, because like you said, it is absolutely plausible and palpable. And we've seen it. We see these people in real life, which is horrific. And I could not agree with you more. And I really think he's an underrated villain.
Yeah.
We need to get more eyes on Jim Rennie because you're entirely correct.
I don't know whether you've read, because you said you hadn't read much of the 70s stuff. Have you read The Dead Zone?
That one I did read. I heard it was romantic and I fell in love with Johnny Smith right away. So I did read that one.
Greg Stilson starts by killing a dog and you're like, well, we don't like this guy. But he, again, exactly the same thing. That predated everything that's come by 40 years. King clearly gets the mundanity of evil. And that's why I'm not really that bothered about Flag. You know what I mean? And I obviously will get to it, which I think this is the longest I've ever talked about Stephen King and not mentioned it in depth. But even Pennywise is this grandiose villain, cosmic scale to his villainy. And that's wonderful. And it's fascinating and it makes your imagination fly. But I think he's much better at the minutiae of villainy. Margaret White from Carrie, who is just a bully, Greg Stilson. These characters, and for me, culminates in Big Jim Rennie. They're so much more frightening because King is like he's looking around and he understands what makes an American psychopath tick.
Very much so. Absolutely. Great choices. I'm just, there's so much richness happening right now. This is like a decadent meal, Neil. So thank you. I'm like, this is fascinating.
No one lets me talk about King this much, so you're very welcome. You're doing my wife a favor because normally I'm just yelling this stuff at her across the dinner table. So
same thing with my boyfriend. Every time I'm like, can I, especially when we're watching an adaptation, I have to pause and say, can I tell you how it's different?
Yeah.
All right, I do want to segue just to skosh from your fabulous list of King villains and kind of segue into Stephen King endings.
Okay.
Probably not more so now, but in the past, I remember one of my friend's moms, who was a King reader, said, oh, he just can't end books. And that really stuck in my head for a long time until I started talking with more constant readers and hashing it out. But have you ever had a Stephen King ending that was so unsatisfying that it kind of soured the journey as a whole? Or are you a constant reader that just appreciates the journey?
I don't think King is a bad ending writer. I've never understood this. So in the early days, he had a predilection to just go like, right, we've got everything to a situation now, burn it with fire. Like there's a lot of things that just, I mean, I think his first three books, Carrie, Salem's Lot, and The Shining, and The Stand to an extent, but I won't spoil that for you. That's a very big version of fire, but they all end in fire, right? And I suppose there's a degree of not laziness, but I think he just constructs these scale models of a town and doesn't quite know how to finish it without some big cleansing flame, But they are all satisfied endings. And as he's gone on, you think about endings like we've mentioned some. Revival is just a stone cold killer of an ending.
Yes.
The one for me, and I'm not answering your question because I'm saying the opposite, what I like. I think King's greatest ending of all time is 11/22/63.
Yeah.
It makes me howl. Because what's great about that book is it's the ending that nobody wants, but it's the ending that you must have. It's like he chiseled away the story and found the only possible shape of the thing that was catched in the stone. Like there was no other outcome that could work. And that thing, like in another life, baby. Oh my God, it ruins me, And I think it's a wonderful ending. So I'm struggling for anything where it's really soured it. And I suppose the closest I can come, weirdly, is Under the Dome.
Yeah.
It certainly didn't spoil the journey for me because, like you said, I don't think like that. I enjoy the journey. It's like, oh, okay, that could have been better. But it felt like, little grey-capped aliens. Really? I tell you what would have made it better. It would have been better if it had been foreshadowed in some way or laced through. I think the way it was on it felt like a sort of just a casual capstone on a story. Whereas if there'd been stuff throughout that you could work out perhaps or piece together and gone like, oh, okay, that would have been better. But to be honest, it doesn't feel like any ending could have really borne the weight of that story because there's so much going on. I'm not quite sure what you're going to do that's going to pull it all together satisfactorily. Unless you just burn it with fire again. And I think he does burn it with fire, doesn't he? Yeah.
He does.
Yeah, I think that's the ending where it's the biggest juxtaposition between how good the book is and how disappointing the ending was. But it certainly didn't ruin the book for me as a whole. And you'll notice I haven't mentioned the Dark Tower.
We're getting there. We're really quick. I do agree with you on the Under the Dome ending. I accept it. But I've thought about it a lot, actually, because after a 1,000-page book, it stays with me for a couple months, usually. I thought to myself, if I were to edit it, would you be okay, or would the readers have been okay with it ending tragically, nobody lives, and we never find out why, and there's zero connection to who put the dome in place, and it's just a great mystery? Would that have really changed the game for it? Would that have worked? Neil, what do you think?
Well, I think it would have worked. I think yes, because King quite famously isn't at all interested in how the machine works or how the sausage gets made. He's just kind of like, right here, because basically all King wants to do in that story is go, right, what would happen if we got a lot of people in a situation and they couldn't leave and then we just kept hitting them with a hammer? Like, how would they react? Because he would try writing it years ago, set in a high-rise building, and it was going to be called The Cannibals. And there's a bit of ambiguity whether that was the same book or a different book. He's given a lot of interviews that make it a bit grey. But clearly he was fascinated by what happens if you get people together and another small town, but this one, they can't just leave. I mean, maybe he only needed the dome because these days, in our new hyper-connected world, you would just leave. Whereas when he wrote Salem's Lot, no one left. So maybe that was the reason he needed the dome because, yeah. But he doesn't really care about the dome. You can tell he doesn't care about the dome. He's not the slightest bit interested in where the dome comes from because he's a good enough writer that if he was interested, he'd have come up with a better reason. So I think he would have been better off just telling the story he wanted to tell and be like, it's the people that matter. And the thing that's keeping them here, yeah, that's a kind of device, but do we really care? And then people like you and I would have sat on podcasts for decades afterwards debating what the dome was.
Right? It could have been glorious.
Yeah. Yeah.
glorious nerdery for decades to come.
Do you know the real nerdy thing about when they find the box and it's got the symbol on it?
I heard that in your interview, and thankfully I had read the Tommyknockers as well as it, of course, on the door.
Yeah.
I don't have a visual of the symbol, though, but the fact that he solidified that they're connected blew me away. That is huge.
Yeah, for those who don't know, there's a symbol at the end of under the dome. They find this box with a strange sort of Chinese style info. What's the word? My mind has gone blank for that kind of. Apologies if that comes across as crass. I've forgotten the word for that kind of symbol. And it's also on the door to Pennywise's lair in It. And it's also found, I think, in the spaceship in the Tommyknockers, though I didn't know that reference till King told me. But when I asked him about it, he clearly just couldn't be even bothered answering it. He was just like, yeah, it's the fucking thing I did. Like, he's not bothered, is he? It's like, enjoy the story and don't bother me. I've got other ones to write, So
I do love that we know that about King, that he really sort of pulls the plug on the deep space cowboy from Lacey's story from the TV series. If you're going too hard into the ether there, he's just going to pull you right back. And I kind of love that. It's pretty great.
Yeah.
I think it was KingCast where they talked about why the ending of Revival was a particular insect. Was there any sort of significance in that? And he's like, nope. Not at all. King being somebody who's not taking it seriously. And so we need to do the same.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are times when we get into Midworld and the Dark Tower where things do matter. But so much of the time, it's just like, just enjoy the story, guys. He's got other things to be getting on with rather than dealing with your Easter egg laden neuroses,
Absolutely. We've come to the doorway of my next question. Now, before I open this door, I have only read the first 4 books of The Dark Tower. I finished Wizard and Glass, and I am debating on whether I should stick with canon or if I should be a rebel and read Wind Through the Keyhole. So you can let me know what you think about that. But this question is just completely open. You could take it any direction you want. What are your thoughts on The Dark Tower?
Right. See, now I've got a quandary.
Okay.
Because I want to talk at length about the Dark Tower, but I really am not willing to deprive you of that journey.
Right.
And anyone who does is not your friend.
Yes, 100%.
So how to have this conversation? I think the Dark Tower is the most flawed, perfect thing I have ever experienced. So The Gunslinger, it's not a bad book. It's not a mess, but it's a hard hurdle to jump, right? And I don't think The Gunslinger is a hard hurdle for people who aren't familiar with King. If you just got that book and read it, you'd be like, okay, this is a kind of quite idiosyncratic sort of sci-fi fantasy novel. That's fine. But when you know King and you know that kind of laconic, avuncular storytelling style he has, to suddenly get this thing where it's such a harsh world and there is no goodness and there is no respite from it's a weird tone, isn't it? And I think it's quite a hard hurdle. So everyone I ever speak to, I say, right, point one, The Gunslingers are like 200 pages long. Just read the damn book because it's worth it, right? It's like when you're eating dinner. If you don't like your peas, eat them because you've got like something delicious on that side of the plate. But it's not a bad book. It's just not what the Dark Tower is. And then it goes on and goes on. And I think Wizard and Glass is very close to my favorite King book. It's only pipped at the post by it. When I read Wizard and Glass, I didn't understand that a book could be that cruel until I read it.
I'm still recovering.
Oh my God. Like the whole thing with, right, spoilers for this part because you've read it, but like the entire thing is like 1,100-page like Western epic about Roland of Gilead, King's Gunslinger, his youth, and this broken man that we've met so far who has no space in his heart for love. You find out that he was this lovelorn teenager once. I mean, it's kind of like I described this the other day. The Gunslinger is kind of like if Cormac McCarthy wrote Dawson's Creek.
Oh my God, that's perfect.
And you care about this relationship, and it's like, it's YA. It's in a way it's YA fiction, right? But it's not YA fiction, and it broke my heart. It just spirals to this inevitable tragedy that you think cannot possibly happen. You're waiting to the final page to think, there's going to be someone who stops this, and it happens, and it scoured my soul when I read it the first time. And it's in a weird way, it's a shame that it's got that frame narrative around it, because it's weird to read those last 50 pages about Roland and his mother and all that. You don't really care by that point because Susan.
Yes.
But yeah, so I think that is close to a perfect book. And then it goes on, and it has its peaks and troughs. And I'm not sure it gets as good again until the final book.
Okay.
I think Wolves of the Calla is good. It's really good, fun novel that's riffing on Seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven, intentionally riffing on that. And then Song of Susanna is the low point of the entire series for me, in the way that the second to last Harry Potter book feels like they're just moving pieces to being into the right place for the final book. It felt a bit like that. And then the last book, I've never been angrier. I've never. I mean, I love it, but it's like Stephen King has gone. Prepare yourself when you read it. It's like Stephen King has gone, okay, I've given you love everything that I've given you, and now I'm going to smash it to pieces and make you watch.
Oh, God.
In the most cruel, remorseless way. But it contains some of the most beautiful language he's ever written. I mean, there's one thing, and we'll talk towards the end about one particular thing. I'm going to try not to spoil things for you, but there is one bit in that book, and it's a quote I say it all the time, kind of whimsical life I lead that I say Stephen King quotes, but there's a line, it's something like, I will not tell you these three lived forever after, because no one does. But I will tell you they lived and there was happiness.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just cry about the last 600 pages of the entire, I just weep. Like,
yeah.
I've waffled there. I haven't really answered your question. I think the thing I said at the start answered it. I think it's the most flawed masterpiece. And by flawed, I mean it follows no rules. It goes all over the map. It doesn't have any kind of sort of concrete, coherent cosmology. He's just riffing. But it's like, a Jimi Hendrix guitar solo. It's probably not technically perfect, but my God, it makes you cry. Yeah, I think it's. Does that answer your question in any way?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm looking for. It's really sort of a raw reaction question. What does that question pull out of you as someone who's read the series? So no, it's perfect. It's really perfect. I am really looking forward to it, but at the same time, I planned on reading Wolves of the Calla, or I planned on reading Wind Through the Keyhole. I was kind of stuck on which path to take, but I was so crushed body and soul from Wizarding Glass that I need time. I haven't been able to touch it this year.
Yeah.
And I needed to, but couldn't. So I think I'll join Roland and the Quartet again in early 2024, but I was wrecked. I needed to recover from the power of Wizarding Glass. Yeah. So yeah.
Well, few things there. One, my advice would be read Wind Through the Keyhole.
Oh, great. Okay.
Because there's no spoilers involved. And after you finish the Dark Tower, it will feel like an addendum.
Okay.
So read it next. But also, have you read Salem's Lot?
Yes, I have.
Fine. I will say no more.
Okay.
Have you read Hearts in Atlantis?
Yes, I have.
You're fine. I'm going to say nothing else. You're fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm excited.
Oh, and something else. Here you go. Here's a thing I want to say. This is the kind of mad spasm of enthusiasm I do. But at some point next year, I don't know when, so I need to take a break. I'm going to be doing a Dark Tower read through with, Nat and Ali, who came on my show to do the King deep dive.
Yes, they were brilliant.
I'm going to do things like that. And when we get to some of the later books, you are welcome to come on and talk about it.
Oh my God.
So,
oh my God, yeah. I'm there.
I'll let you know. I'll let you know.
Please do. Oh my gosh, I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely thrilled because it took me a while to fall in love with Roland and the quartet because, like you said, Gunslinger's a little bumpy.
Mm,
But by the time I got to part 5 of the Gunslinger, where I realized what the Dark Tower is, and then getting to know Eddie and Susanna and Jake and Noy, I'm like, okay, I'm in. I'm in.
yeah.
Right now, I really am in a kind of like love-hate with Roland because I get it. But man, he broke my heart. He broke my heart. And it's the power of the story. And he broke me, and yet I'm still with him. I'm still walking behind him. And that's a powerful realization I've had.
Oh, there are so many things you don't know, and
I know.
oh God, I feel like I need to take care of you with what you're going to go through. Honestly, just yeah,
I
right.
appreciate that. I will need verbal processing later. I know I'm going to need it because yeah, I broke up Wizard and Glass into 3 parts because I could not be logical. I was like
Mm.
an overflowing emotional mess. I could not get it together.
Well, I've just thought of another villain, Eldred Jonas.
I remember. Yep.
Mm. Here's a question: if I could punch any king villain in the face,
Oh, beautiful.
it would be Eldred Jonas.
Love it.
Yeah.
That might have to be a new question I ask in the series. We're going to segue just a skosh into individual characters. And I wanted to ask, I know you mentioned Danny Torrance in Dr. Sleep probably wasn't your favorite, but is there any King character who you would love to have more spotlight, either in a sequel, prequel, a standout, breakout, much like we're getting with Holly Gibney, who's just a star now? Is there anybody who you would like to get their own spotlight?
I don't want King to ever write a sequel again. I
Okay.
just want new stories. Well, and I say a lie, I want the third Talisman book, which he did allude to writing when he came on my show.
Yes, he
So
did.
and then the press picked it up, so he's kind of held to it now. So yeah, so I want the third Talisman book. I don't really want him to write anything else. I want him to tell new stories, but I am obsessed by quite a few weird, kind of enigmatic, not even side characters, just like referenced characters in King's world. Because he does that so well. He drops in these stories within stories or anecdotal stuff. And there's so much I want to know. And the 3 that come to mind, I was trying to think. So David Quick, I think it's David Quick, who in the Dark Tower, he's this World War II pilot who at some point crossed over into Midworld and his plane crashed and he had he was then the grandfather of the TikTok man and stuff like that, So I want to know about that. I want to know what happened to David Quick. I love that stuff.
Right.
And the Yellow Card Man from 11/22/63.
Yes.
Right, what's that dude's deal? Right, the guy who's kind of seems to be in some way behind the scenes of reality, or he has some special knowledge, but it's just not fleshed out at all. And yeah, King probably doesn't know. He's probably got no interest in who the Yellow Card Man is. But I'd love to know more about that. And I would love to know about Stevens the Butler from The Breathing Method. Have you read The Breathing Method?
I have, yes. I liked that one a lot.
The Breathing Method is one of the novellas in different seasons, and it keys into a thing that I've always been really romantic about, which is the idea of being part of like a storytelling gentleman's club, right? I don't like rich people, but if I was rich, the one thing I would do is join a club where I get to sit there on Christmas Eve swilling brandy and telling ghost stories, right? And in The Breathing Method, there's this storytelling society. They are butlered by a guy called Stevens. And there's this hint of otherworldliness to him, this kind of, I don't know, a suggestion of immortality about him. And I want to know what other things he's seen and where he's come from. And I would love, it's never going to happen ever, but if I could commission King to write, talk about being rich, but if I could commission King I'd say like, right, Stephen, write me a book of short stories where you expand on your weird little nodule characters who don't, tell me who these people are. I want to know that. I'd love that book.
Oh, me too. I am obsessed with the Manhattan Club. I love it. I'm thrilled that we have 2 short stories. We've got The Man Who Would Not Shake Hands and Skeleton Crew, and then we have The Breathing Method. And you're right, it's so rich. It's just soaked in like, what is going on? What is this place? And Stevens is at the heart of that. And you just made me remember how much I love the Manhattan Club.
Yeah.
I want more. I want more of that so much.
Have you ever read Peter Straub's Ghost Story?
That one I have not. No.
So I would recommend that.
Okay.
I mean, King himself said it's the greatest work of 20th century horror, I think. He made some very, very grand claim, and it's true. I mean, it's a masterpiece. But that is about storytelling. It's about four old men who get together and they share stories about weird things that happen to them. And then some of those stories reemerge in their present. And it's a brilliant book, but it's very slippery. It's very, very odd and jangly and all over the place. But if you like the Manhattan Club, read Ghost Story.
Okay, it's shooting to the top of the list.
Yeah. And it's a great winter book as well. I'm doing a deep dive on it with John Langan and some other horror writers for a kind of Christmas Eve special. So, yeah, read it and then listen to that. And I think you'll get a lot from it because it's a great book.
Oh, I'm thrilled. I will do that. I'm looking forward to it. Piggybacking on the fantastical a little bit, I wanted to ask if you were able to get stuck in a fictional King setting. You could go the macabre route and hang out in the Overlook for the winter, or you could go the sunny route and head to Joyland. Where would you choose and why?
So I'm going to guess that in 120 something episodes, you've never had this answer. Maybe I'm wrong. I would like to go to Little Tall Island.
Oh my God. No, I haven't. I haven't had that answer, but I'm freaking out.
So I love islands. And years ago, I did a whole trip around America and I drove all over the place. And I went to Martha's Vineyard.
Oh, beautiful.
And I was just like, I want to live here. I think when I was there, George Clooney was like renting a house for like 10 grand a week or something. I was like, it's probably out of my price range. But I love islands. I love that like microcosmic community thing. I'm quite an offensive person, so I would probably be ostracized like week one. I'm quite an annoying guy. Probably wouldn't be the right setting for me, but I love the idea of it. And I would basically like to spend a storm in Little Tall Island with those people like Andre Lenoge comes calling, because I've not got kids, so crack on, it's not my problem. And also I love Dolores Claiborne, who was the other major inhabitant on Little Tall Island. So yeah, it'd be that for me. There's something really romantic about an island off the East Coast. It's just this hardy, harsh, cozy sort of almost Scandinavian feel to it. I imagine it being windswept and like warm, ruddy light coming through the inn window, and you're all in there telling stories. And I just did something about it. Like I watched Midnight Mass, and I was like, I want to live here. You know, yeah, that it'd be Little Tall Island for me. Most people would expect me to say it. Say Derry from It, because It is my favorite book of all time. I'm obsessed by the book. But I've actually been to Bangor, and King took Bangor, Maine, and just changed the street names. And Bangor is a lovely place, but the Derry version is kind of like its tarnished twin. So actually, who wants to live in a place where every 30 years a lot of people get murdered? Like, I want to be friends with the losers, but I don't want to live in Derry, you know? So yeah, it's Little Tall Island for me.
Oh, perfection. I'm going to come visit. I'm going to bring my cats and my boyfriend, and we're going to have a cottage in the same street because I'm obsessed. I'm obsessed with Storm of the Century.
It's great, right? It's really great.
It's my favorite. I don't think it's been matched for me. The script is incredible. The setting is everything. Andre Lenoge is beyond. I'm just obsessed.
And again, it's that inescapable conveyor belt towards doom that you think is going to be averted. And it just keeps going. And like, oh my God, this, you know, like the worst can happen. It's, yeah, incredible.
Yes, and Midnight Mass just echoed it. It just echoed it. I'll be there with you on Little Tall. All right, we are making our way, just a few more. I know that you don't, well, it seems like you probably don't talk to a lot of non-horror enthusiasts, but you've mentioned that your lady isn't a huge horror fan, and so I'm sure there are people in your life who aren't keen on reading frightening things, and unfortunately, King is pigeonholed into the horror genre, whether we like it or not. So what do you recommend to people who want to read King but are like, I don't want to read horror or anything scary?
So I actually wrote a full article on this for The Guardian called Where to Begin with Stephen King, which I liked it. A lot of people argued, but it's my opinion. I think so. Basically, there's two kind of ways to answer your question. If someone is new to King and wants to read what they think King is, like the horror writer, I would always say start with Salem's Lot. Because I think, although it's not his best book, I think nothing else he's ever written is closer to what we all think Stephen King is. Because it's, small town setting, massive multicast character list, a kind of tropey villain, a vampire that he's riffing on, and that kind of rugged American realism juxtaposed with this disruptive supernatural force. I think, even though people may not articulate it that way, that's what most people think King does.
Right.
And I think Salem's Lot is the quintessence of that. But if you want to come to King and you don't necessarily want to read horror, I'd say you've got two places to start depending on your appetite for pages. Because if you want a bite-sized intro, I would say go with Different Seasons, which is the collection of novellas, which, God, my memory now, it's Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption. It's The Body, which is Stand By Me, the film. And then Apt Pupil. Is it Apt Pupil? Am I getting this right?
You are.
Apt Pupil, which is a horror novel, but it's not a horror novel in the way that we think of as horror. It's a dark thriller. It's about a boy who befriends an SS guard who has escaped sort of capture. Awful thing happens to a cat in that book, which I will just warn people about.
Oh, it's horrific.
Yeah. And it's got the breathing method. So it flirts with the dark, definitely, but it's never horror for its own sake. No one would earmark that as horror. And the other one is 11/22/63, which I think is the greatest book of the last 20 years that he's written. I think it's his post-millennial magnum opus, and it's essentially a love story. And any horror in that is the horror of loss, and it's the horror of nostalgia and of helplessness, I suppose. But it's much more about love than it is about anything. And it will warm and break your heart. But you will not come away from it frightened. My wife read it and loved it.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I can't sing high enough praises for 11/22/63. I'm so glad it exists.
Yeah.
Tremendous list. I did now want to ask about Stephen King females. This is something that if I do pursue any sort of academic papers down the road, it'll be on this topic.
Okay.
I just love Stephen King females, and I love what he does with dark goddess archetypes. I could really, really go a long time on exploring these ladies, but I wanted to ask what your favorite Stephen King female is. Of course, it never has to be just one. You could do a top 3 or a top 5.
Yeah, I'm not very good at specificity, am I? So for a start, I'm glad you say that you like what he does, because he gets so criticized. When I used to be in academia, one of the main reasons that a lot of my scholarly peers didn't like King, it was either they thought he was a hack, which is nonsense, or they thought he was a misogynist, which I think is absolute nonsense, because he started his career with a book about female rage and female puberty, and he does it really, really well. And then you look at the other characters he's written, like, where is this misogyny? Where is this? All right, he might have a tin ear sometimes. I'm not saying he gets it all right, but Christ, I wouldn't either, But there's certainly no attempt to belittle women or to make them anything other than often quite more quietly heroic than the men. His men are far more weak, I would say, than the women. And I think that comes from his mother, because it clearly, he was brought up by a single mother who worked her arse off. And clearly he has understanding of the sacrifice of motherhood. So I'm glad that you think he writes women. I won't say well, because that's character to character, but I think he writes women with good intent. But let's put it that way. My favourite, though, it's a toss-up between 3, but these 3 could be in any order. And it's potentially Rose the Hat, but I think so much of that is Married with Rebecca Ferguson.
That's okay.
So that's a struggle.
She's foxy.
The 2 that I find it really difficult to choose between are Bevy from It, and Dolores Claiborne. And I think, oh Christ, like Dolores Claiborne is just, if I could go for a drink with any character from a King book, it would be it'd be Dolores Claiborne. I think she's a masterpiece of a character. Like the fact that he gets her voice, and that book is written with uninterrupted prose, and this I'm actually trying to write a novella right now, which is basically mimicking King's attempt. It's a homage, but I'm ripping it off. And like the relationship she has with her employer, Vera Donovan, like one of the great antagonistic friendships of literature. Like it's such a complex relationship she has with that woman. And like even Vera's, that quote she has, what is it? What she say? Sometimes you have to be a high riding bitch to survive. Sometimes you have to be being a bitch is all a woman has,
Yep.
and stuff. And like what she does to protect her daughter. I think Dolores is a phenomenal character. But then Bevy, we haven't talked about Andy Muschietti adaptation of It, and I am angry.
Let's do that, because I just reread it and Bevy is still echoing for me. So let's go there.
So what do you think of Bevy's character?
So I have a very complicated, I love her, and at the same time, I feel she's not fleshed out enough for me. I don't care for the fact that she is sexualized in the narrative so much. Like it's always about her body and her prepubescent looks. I wish that was toned down a little bit, but it's very hard for me. She is so complex for me because I wish she would be left alone. I just want her to be left alone. And at the same time, I'm in awe of the person she blooms into and her strength and what she endures, the kind of friend she is. But when I was analyzing Bevy, I think, and speaking with others about her, she is loved because people want to defend her. And I think that's the gut reaction that I feel. I love her because I want to fight for her and I want to protect her, because I don't know if she's able to do that herself.
That's very interesting.
Yeah, it's different.
But no, because it is the inverse of my take on Bevy. So basically, I'm not going to reopen the wounds of like the whole underage sex scene in It, because I talked about it at length on my It deep dive with Ali and Nat, and they said smarter things than I could ever possibly have said. Ali pointed out, for example, that it is a book about puberty, but only Bevy's puberty is ever really examined. The boys never have wet dreams and they never get, like inappropriate erections, but Bevy's puberty is laid bare.
Yeah.
But then she also made the point that this is a book written from it's a book about boyhood, in which Bevy is always a kind of, like you said, the goddess figure. It's the Madonna whore thing, isn't it? All the way through. That's how her father sees her, certainly, as this Madonna whore child who is sliding in his eyes from one end to the other of that spectrum. And I think enough things have been said about that sex scene, enough hysterical things that I think are not warranted. Basically, I'm going to dig a hole here. Listen to my episode with Ali and Nat, and you'll get that we have a moderate take on this, but an interesting one. But the thing about her being a damsel in distress bothers me, because that's why I despise the second movie not in the second one, it happens in the first one. The Andy Muschietti adaptations, I think the first one is great until the end, and the second one is an abomination of a thing. It takes this character of Bevy, who is so incredibly represented by that actress, something Lilith, I can't remember her name now, but she is just a phenomenon in that film. And Bevy is the one who can shoot. Bevy's the one who they trust with the silver dollar.
Yeah.
Bevy's the one at the end of the day who is fighting off genuine sexual assault from all quarters. And I think one of the things that gets missed in King's writing of Bevy is that, yes, it's awful that she is constantly sexualized. And I think there are moments now and again where the objectification slides from the character's point of view to the writer's point of view. I think, but they're very few and far between, But I think what he's actually quite accurately depicting that at that time, a young girl would be navigating the world in that way. She would be constantly objectified. And so I think to make her otherwise would be a bit of a cheat, really, But again, there's a degree of crassness we can talk about. Blah, 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 blah. She, to me, is not a victim. She is a hero. And that film makes her a damsel in distress. She's literally dangling from Pennywise's web like a fucking toy prize to be won at a fun fair. And it offends me that they did that to like this layered problematic character. They just made her a prize to win.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's sorry. I get quite ranty about on that topic.
I get it. She pulls it out of everybody.
Imagine watching that film as a little girl. Imagine watching that film as a little girl and you're like, oh, this Bevy's incredible. Oh, no, there she is. The boys are being brave and they're saving her. Like, come on, guys. And I'm not being funny. That's not in the book. So that's a choice you've made. That is a choice you've made in the 21st century to take the one female character in a story that was written 30 years ago, in which she was a hero when other books at that time would have reduced her to nothing. King didn't. And then in the 21st century, you just had to retell that story and reduce her to a prize to be won by the bravest boy.
Yeah.
It pisses me off. It really does.
It's so complex. Like when I think about Bevy, I really get analysis paralysis. Like you said, I don't demonize the way she's written. I don't hate it. I get it. I understand. And so I give a lot of credit for that. I try and balance it out. But at the same time, I'm like, I feel I can't, it's hard for me to not come at it with the 2023 female perspective. The YA heroines that we have are vastly different. They're strong, they fight, and they're absolutely antithesis of what Bev is kind of described to be. And so it's really hard for me. I think I'm pulled in too many directions with Bev. But I agree. Yeah. I wasn't crazy about the film adaptation.
No.
I think they got a lot wrong. I was more pissed about Mike. I think Mike really broke my heart this second read through, and I was pissed how the film showed Mike. Because Mike, for me, is very regal and strong and wise at the return of everybody. And in the film, at least in the second one, he's dishonest and manic and unsure and conniving. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? So I was more pissed about Mike. But Beverly, to come back to it, I love your perspective and it's valid. She's so complex for me in that book.
Yeah.
Because like you said, there is so much to celebrate about her heroism. But at the same time, King doesn't give her as much spotlight. Like, for example, when Eddie dies, she's just standing there. She didn't really get that moment to shine.
Yeah, that's very true, actually, yeah.
We kind of get those kind of moments. The ending when she's with Ben, I love that, but at the same time, why did she sleep with Bill and not Ben? Or rather, why can't she ride into the sunset by herself? Why does she have to be on the arm of another man? And so I reconcile that based on what King wanted for her. That was his idea of a happy ending for Bev. But she just got out of an incredibly abusive relationship. I mean, this lady doesn't know who she is. I would have wanted to see some real agency if she would have rode Silver right out of town by her lonesome and been brave and solo. So I'm stuck on Bev. I'm stuck. I could go a dozen different directions. And so I think everybody who loves her has amazing points to make.
It's a difficult one to navigate as a guy, to be honest.
Right.
Because you are always, at the end of the day, coming up against the fact that there is a scene in which she has sex with 6 boys, to save them. Like, and you can prevaricate and contextualize as much as you want. That is an uncomfortable scene to end up at, whatever you want to say. We talked on my show about why I think that scene is not as perverse as the pop culture reaction to it has become in the last few years. I mean, King himself said it wasn't even mentioned, when he wrote it, but obviously in different climates, that is a more questionable scene. But I could argue I think the scene earns its place in the book. And I think with her depiction as a character, I think there is a part of it where you've kind of just got to go, you know what? It was written by a guy who was, when was it, 86? He would have been 39. Yeah. So he'd have been like mid-30s when he started writing it. And I'm thinking about myself, I'm 40 now. I'm thinking about myself when I was 35, even in these enlightened days. I'm sort of thinking like, this is a guy who is trying to write a book about the essence of childhood. And it's so dredged from his own experiences. It's so like lifted, every reference, it's the Ben and the library and stuff. It's so taken from his own life. And like, I actually think with that context, he did a pretty good job at writing a girl character who had more agency than I think a lot of his peers would have given her at that time. So I think there is a degree where you've got to go for who he was when he wrote it and what he was trying to achieve as an overarching project. I think I give him a pass. But there are definitely problems. But the problems are kind of one of the reasons I think she's one of the greatest characters, because, you know, what other character in King's kind of, you know, dramatis personae do we spend this much time talking about?
You're right.
You know, so I think for me, yeah, it's her or Dolores. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. I understand why she is so revered, and I put her up there myself only because it is such a complex navigation of this lady. I agree with you. He was who he was when he wrote it, and that's how he wanted her to be. I accept that. I do. But I have to put myself in place. Like, you are coming at this from a very modern, a very feminist perspective. You have to balance that out with what's going on in the narrative.
What do you think of Rosie in Rose Madder?
Oh, beautiful question. I love her. I love her so much.
Because to me, that I think he's writing, I think that's a second pass at Bevy. I think he's saying, okay, what would Bevy have done if she left her husband and didn't go to Derry?
Oh my God.
If she went to do her own thing, you know, if she went and started her own life, what would Bevy's life have been?
I am absolutely slayed by the brilliance. I never made that connection before, but it works. It absolutely works. I adore Rose. I do love Bevy. I do. I do love her. I just get lost in the weeds. Oh, wow. That's a beautiful comparison. I don't know how I missed that.
He's got a lot of books, to be fair.
It's true, right? I love Rose Madder. I mean, that one's bumpy, and Norman Daniels is nuts, but I find that's really underrated. I like talking about Rose Madder a lot. I love the Greek mythology wild ride we go on with that.
Yeah. I read that. I read that years later. I tried it when I was a kid, and I was just, you know, at 13, I was not ready for a kind of feminist fairy tale. I just like, this is going over my head. And then I read it like for the first time as part of that big Stephen King reread. I was like, this book is so good. Like, it's just so tight and just, it's just impressive storytelling. It's brilliant. Love it.
Yay. I'm so glad. I think Rose needs more eyes on it. I'm happy you enjoy it. If you could get, I don't know if you already possess one of these treasures. If you do, awesome. But if you could get one novel signed by King, just one, which one would that be for you?
My heart says it because it's my favorite book. But actually, because I'm a kind of contrarian, From a Buick 8.
Yes!
Because I just love it so much.
It's so good.
And it's such an underrated book.
Yes.
It's such an underrated book. And I like the idea of the weirdness of getting him to sign that one, because I bet it's barely ever been signed, you know, because it's just so neglected. But to be honest, I'm not really interested in signed books. Like, my books, I read them in the bath. I kick the shit out of them. I don't care. Like, the object, I am just not a kind of book fetishist. I'm not interested. It's the story that matters. And if I don't care. I just don't care.
That's beautiful. That's how we all should be. We really should. We actually have 3 more questions. So, Neil, as one animal lover to another, who's your favorite Stephen King pet? Who's the animal or animals that really move you? And you can have as many as you want.
There's only one. Well, they all move me, but there's one that... So this is where I'm going to tread very carefully here with spoilers for you. It's Oi, the Billy Bumbler.
Sweet baby.
I don't think you're ready.
I know. My hypothesis is that I'm prepared. I'm prepared to just break.
When I try and write about Oi, this is not like performative nonsense. This is the truth. I was making notes for this interview, and I started writing down a few things about Oi, and I got choked up. And it's big. My dog looks like Oi.
Oh.
I mean, when this goes live, I will put there's a picture I have of my dog Ted that I will put on Twitter when this goes live.
Yeah.
And I will say, look, I keep saying, Mike Flanagan, please cast my dog as Oi. Right. And like he breaks that poor, That character breaks my heart. And there is a bit late on in the book, in the final book, tread carefully, when whoever gets there comes to the tower. I'm picking my words very carefully.
Okay.
They come to the tower and they start singing the names of the people who have been instrumental in getting there. And Roland is singing, I come in the name of blah, 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 blah. I come in the name of Jake Chambers of New York. I come in the name of Eddie Dean of New York. I come in the name of Susanna Dean of New York. And he finishes off by going, and I come in the name of myself. I come in the name of Roland Deschain. I come in the name of myself, and you will open to me. And it's like a fist pump moment. He's demanding the door open, so it's amazing. But he also says, and everyone else just gets, I come in the name of Jake of New York. I get choked up, honestly.
Yeah.
And he says, but he includes, and I come in the name of Oi the Brave of Midworld. And
now I'm crying.
Like I often can't say those words. My voice breaks on the brave. Like people can laugh at me all they want. I don't care.
No.
I wish everyone could feel the way I feel about this little character, or about any character, because this is what books are about. Like there's a telepathy between the page and my heart. It's just, honestly. And Flanagan gets it, because when I asked Flanagan about Oi, he even used the phrase. He said, Oi, whose body was far smaller than the heart it held. And he just, in fact, you know what? You asked me what book I want. I want a prequel about Oi. I want to know what he saw and did before he joined the quartet. Why was he alone and lonely? And how did he get to be so fucking brave? Because I love that little bumbler more than it should be possible to love anything that's conjured from words and thoughts. I love him so much.
Oh my God. I'm having to hold my tears back. Thank you for sharing that, Neil. I'm broken over here. I agree.
Ruins me.
He's so special. I remember in Wastelands when we first meet him.
Yeah.
There's this little precious angel baby. There's a bird child who's wonderful. Okay.
And like the rest, he gets his name shouted out.
Oh God. I'm dead, Neil. I'm just going to be a pile of tears, but I'm excited. Very moved that it's such a special character for you. Onward. Tell me about your favorite Stephen King team or group or couple, friendship, bromance, whatever you like.
This is a simple one. It comes straight to mind because obviously we all love the quartet, don't we? They are great. But for me, the greatest and possibly most heartbreaking friendship is Jackie and Wolf from The Talisman.
Okay.
Have you read The Talisman?
I haven't, unfortunately. I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. It's fine. So in this world, Jack Sawyer, this boy whose mother is dying, he goes into another world to, and it's kind of linked to the Dark Tower, you find out later on. King kind of retcons it, so it's part of the Dark Tower. And he goes into this other world and he meets many people. And he's on a quest. It's like a traditional quest narrative. And it's called Jack Sawyer, so it's very much riffing on Tom Sawyer and Huck Finn, intentionally so. And he meets this character called Wolf, who basically, in some ways, performs the function of Jim. He's kind of an innocent, And Wolf is a sort of big, burly, slightly dopey shepherd who is also a werewolf. And there's this line, this kind of refrain where he says, "You're the herd, Jackie." He's always like, "I've got to protect the herd. I must protect the herd." And then at like one really heroic moment, he's like, "You're the herd, Jackie."
Oh dear.
And I have never forgiven King for what he did to me with that book. Because he makes Wolf suffer in the most awful ways. And it's almost like Wolf is a pet, as awful as that sounds. And it's potentially, when you're looking at the Huck Finn analogy, slightly problematic, if you're going to take that too far. But like Wolf is kind of half friend, half companion, half pet, because he's not equipped for our, because they keep going back and forwards across worlds. He's not equipped for our world. He hasn't got the frame of reference, so Jackie has to kind of look after him, and Wolf's a liability. But they're just brilliant together. And if the Duffer Brothers, who are making the Talisman, which I'm not happy about, if they screw that up, I'll be writing strongly worded letters about that. Yeah, that's my favorite friendship in King's fiction, Jackie and the Wolf.
Oh, beautiful. I'm looking forward to it. I have been exploring Fantasy King this year. I read Eyes of the Dragon and Fairy Tale, and so everybody's been reaching out, preaching Talisman. So I think that's going to have to happen next year because I really enjoy Fantasy King.
What do you think of Fairy Tale? Because you just reminded me that Radar exists, and that was a whole thing.
Oh my God, I loved Radar. I enjoyed Fairy Tale. I did. My overall conclusion is that I think it needs more time in the stew pot for me. Like, I think it needs to age a little bit.
Okay.
I think with King readers, we didn't really know what to think about that one. I've largely heard a lot of people kind of displeased with it. And I get it because it's so out there. But I love the hero's journey. I love the world building, which we don't see a lot of in King's catalog. I don't think he does a lot of world building to the extent that I would like. I think he always leaves a lot in the shadows. And here he just made this amazing little mythical place. And I was enthralled by what he was doing. So I think I probably enjoy the process more than the actual output. But I found it charming. I found it enjoyable. And I liked what he was doing. I was kind of intrigued by it. I wouldn't say I loved it, but I'm kind of eager to see it age. I wonder what we might say about it in 10 years' time.
I loved it, but I loved the stuff in Illinois so much more than the stuff in Empis. I just loved I asked King this question about whether he is actually at heart a realist rather than a horror writer. I think he just uses horror as a kind of device, as a plot device to really talk about the realist things he wants to talk about.
Yeah.
And in that book, just this gentle story about a kid taking care of his dad and taking care of his neighbor's dog when the old man dies. And I loved it. And then the MP stuff was great, but it felt like it needed its own book. I would have liked it to have been written perhaps as a duology where there was more time to spend really fleshing out Empis and why we should care about this gladiatorial combat. It all felt a little bit too rushed in the second half. But I certainly think it was, I really enjoyed it. And these people who don't like it, it's kind of like, oh, come on. What do you want? It's just a great characters. Like, don't be too grumpy, you know?
I definitely wouldn't give it the vitriol that many gave it. I thought that was very out of line. But I agree with you completely. I felt the third act, I struggled. It's a little disjointed for me. But overall, Charlie and Radar, that was so precious. I got on board with that right away. We've got one more constant reader interview question, and then we've just got like a personal Kim C question, and then we're on our way out. Last question, top 3 or top 5 King titles, and what put them there for you? Why did they get that spot?
Okay, I'm going to be brief and not long-winded. First of all, here are the 5 books that I think are the best Stephen King books, in no particular order. The Shining, Misery, Different Seasons, The Stand, and It. I think they're the best ones. They are not my favourite ones.
Copy.
That's the best. Shining, The Stand, Misery, Different Seasons, and It. My favourite books, I would say, and this could change on a daily basis. I actually ranked all 75 for Esquire, and it nearly killed me trying to decide how that sat alongside that. And this is a different list than what I put in that magazine, so it shows how often it changes. Top 5 for me. At 5, From a Buick 8.
Nice.
At 4, 11, 22, 63. At 3 and 2, I can't divide them. 3 and 2, you decide, people, where you want these to go. It's The Stand and Wizard and Glass.
Beautiful.
And number 1 is It.
Rightly so. Perfect.
So from this, we take that I like his longer books because I like when he has room to breathe, because I like the tangents. I like when he just stops caring about editorial restraint, or I like when he just doesn't care about structure anymore. You know, he's just like, right, this is happening. We're going to agree with this. But what all of those books have got in common, take Wizard and Glass out of it for a second, what Buick 8, 11, 22, 63, The Stand, and It have got in common is that they are all massive stories about characters set against an insane backdrop, but it's the drama in the foreground that matters. It's their reactions to the insanity that matters, not the insanity. So, yeah, sure, we care about who the Dark Man is. We're interested in why, they've gone back in time to save Kennedy and what the Yellow Car Man is. And it's, what is the car in a Buick? We care, but that's not the stuff that we take away from the book with us. We take away all the little human moments. And I think he's never been better at creating those human moments. Like when I think of The Stand, the first scene that comes to my mind is the scene with Nick Andros when he's arrested. He gets beaten up. And then Captain Trips hits and he goes and he's looking after the sheriff and the sheriff's wife because they're sick. It's like a little nested story about this guy, like look after these two sick people in the middle of this catastrophe. And, and when I think about from a Buick 8, I think about them sitting around on the bench outside the station, just telling stories, and stuff like that. And 11-22-63, I think about the dance that they throw for Sadie. I don't think about the weirdness. I think about those human moments. And I don't think he's ever been better at doing them than in those 4 books. And then you've got Wizard and Glass, which is just probably his greatest ever feat of plotting and storytelling. That's my answer.
Oh, so great. That's a beautiful list. Ah, my heart. I'm so moved. I feel very seen. I feel very validated. Before we head out of here on this stellar, beyond stellar constant reader interview, you got to chat with Mr. King this year, Neil. And it is, I'm not just saying that, it is one of, if not the best King interview I've ever heard. I just feel you hit it on the head. You absolutely cleared through all the horror stuff and said, actually, Mr. King, you're an American realist. You're an American realist who uses horror to kind of amplify what you're trying to say. And I've never been so thrilled for a person to just say that to him and validate what I feel every day of my life, which is he's so much more, so much bigger, so much more.
And he said a really cool thing to me because I said, I remember saying, I laid out this thesis, with the arrogance that only, a white male podcaster can have. And then I said to him, does that hold water, that theory? And he said, it doesn't even leak. And I was like, yes, thank you, Stephen. It
was perfect. So brilliant, beyond brilliant. But I guess my personal question is, you did such a brilliant job of staying composed and just great segues. And I don't know, you just rocked it. And so my question is, how did you not self-combust?
So it was a weird one. It really was a weird one. So what happened is I did the It podcast with Nat and Ali. And then he retweeted it. I was in London seeing Bruce Springsteen. I was at a Springsteen concert. It was like the best day of my life. And he retweeted it saying, these guys, it's quite funny. These guys have talked about my book. You might like it. He wrote something like, quite smart, occasionally amusing, which is like the most damning with faint praise. And the other day, I had my 40th birthday. And when I turned up, all my mates had a T-shirt made with quite smart, occasionally amusing on the T-shirt. So when I saw that, I was like hyperventilating. Like, oh my God, because Stephen King is aware of me, And then I kind of thought, I need to know how to use this, right? Because I don't want to, because I'm a nobody, right? I've got one shot. So I thought, if not now, when? So I happen to have a random contact for a random person who knows his agent. And I basically just sent this email, didn't even know if it was the right person, if it would get there, didn't know anything. Sent it saying, hi, if not now, when? Felt like I should reach out now because Stephen mentioned the podcast and I, if not, fine, but would love to speak to him. I sent that out about 11 o'clock at night. 2 hours later, I got an email from Stephen King.
Oh my God.
Saying, let's do it. You guys rock.
Oh my God.
And I was like, right. So then I went into a complete tailspin and I thought, right, don't email him back. Look cool. And then we had a bit of a chat about stuff. And then we did an impromptu practice thing to make sure that all the software worked. And I was not cool. I was not cool at all. I was kind of like, hello, Mr. King. Thank you for doing this. It really means a lot to me. And you could tell he was just kind of like, right, we know the software works. Get out of my life. I've got things to do. And I was trying to chat and he was like, right, I've got to go. See you later. So, but weirdly, that helped. Because when I spoke to him next, that wasn't the first time we spoke. And I was able to do it much more as like, this is an interview. And whilst I was doing it, the only way I've been able to describe this is I knew, obviously, this was Stephen King, but it didn't feel like the man who wrote The Shining. It felt like a cool dude I was talking to, but it didn't feel like that. And then when we finished, he said some very nice things and stuff, and it was really cool. And then we went our separate ways. And then I did the edit, and that was just kind of like process. So I didn't think of him as like, that's King. I was like, that's a voice I need to edit, you know? It was only when I listened to it back when it went live that I was like, oh my God, that's Stephen King. And then again, I was not cool, you know, at all. I sort of sat there with a bruise, sort of shaking, you know. But I suppose the reason I was able to be okay was I know all this stuff. Like, he's not going to hoodwink me. When I spoke to Margaret Atwood, I've only read a few of her books. I was like, if I ask a stupid question, you know, she's formidable. If I show I haven't read that book, is she going to be offended? With King, I've read everything. Like, he's not going to shock me with something, you know? So I felt prepared. It was just about getting over my own sort of, you know, the most epic imposter syndrome imaginable. But he was just so lovely. He was such a nice man. He put me at ease.
Well, the interview sings. It just sings, Neil. It's just beautiful. And you did so well. It's so strong. It moved me. I get very misty-eyed about it. It's a thrill to have somebody, a podcaster, do such an amazing job, ask these amazing questions that were spot on, dead on. So well done. Well done. I'm just so thrilled. And what an amazing story. I'm 1 degree away. I'm happy. The rest of my life, 1 degree away from King.
Well, without sounding really, really smug, he followed me on Twitter last night. So when I retweet this, say we've had this conversation, you might see it. You never know.
You never know. Never know. But I think I'm so glad that your interview unlocked what a lovely man he is. And I know a lot of interviews do that, but something about yours is just, it's not soaked in horror stuff. It's just dances around it, and it gets to some really beautiful examinations that you're a really great writer of things that aren't just horror, King. Like, you're a massively talented person who's really kind and really cool.
I think he cares about writing so much
that
he really responds well to people who care about writing, because I've heard other podcasts interview him and they often ask more questions about the films than the books. And I find that an odd thing to do, because, you know, you've got King here for an hour. Like, this is the storyteller of our century. Why are you asking about what his thoughts are on someone else's adaptation of his work? Like, ask about the work, you know? And I think he picked up on that. I think he got that I really loved what he does, not the industry around him, if that makes sense. And he's just so generous because, like I say, I am a nobody. I have a little podcast with a few thousand listeners, right? I am a mote in God's eye when it comes to King. But he knows what he's doing, and he rewards you with these tidbits. Like, he basically crowbarred a reveal about his next 2 books into that conversation. And he's not an idiot. He knows the power of that. He knows that he is giving me something there that is like a currency. And it's like he anoints people that he thinks have earned it. And he gives you this thing that is like a key to a door, you know, and he doesn't have to do that. You know, he's got nothing to gain. What can I possibly offer King? And he was just so generous. And it was so lovely to meet your actual hero. Like, the only hero I have, there is no one else. There is him. Bruce Springsteen, kind of. But there is King. And to meet him and to just be so gratified and so rewarded with someone being better than you think they are. I loved it. It's the highlight of my year. The highlight of my life, honestly. Like, if you could have told me, 10 years ago, and I was killing myself in my thesis, or told me when I was 14 and reading it, if you'd have told me that one day I'd sit down and have a conversation with him and that we'd email now and again, it would just be, I would laugh in your face.
Oh, I'm having to like swallow my tears back just listening to that, because you are all of us, but you did it so beautifully. And so there's just an immense amount of gratitude for somebody who did it right, Neil. And that's what I think it is. You focused on the best parts of King, which is his writing, and I'm just immensely grateful. Somebody did it right, and I'm just so thrilled it was you, and I'm thrilled that you had this experience. Thank you for sharing it with everybody listening.
Well, we need to reverse this round because I need to know what you think about all of these books. So at some point, you have to come on my show so I can grill you because I need to know what your favorite king pet is and your favorite king female and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah.
Anytime, anytime. I did study Gothic novels, so I could talk classics if you want.
Okay.
I'm pretty well read from my MFA. My Britlit's not great, but we could talk about paint drying or grass growing, and it would be a thrill, Neil. So we could absolutely talk about anything you wanted.
Well, I'm actually about 20 miles from Haworth, which is where the Brontes grew up. So I'm about 20 miles from Wuthering Heights. That's my Gothic link.
Oh my goodness. Is that the Moors?
Yep, the moors are just out of that window and they go all the way to Haworth and Wuthering Heights.
Oh my God. Yeah, let's nerd out. Let's talk Rochester. Let's talk Heathcliff. Yep. I'll chat with you about anything. But yeah, I would love to do a reverse constant reader. That's never happened before. But you've provided some absolutely stellar answers that are incredibly unique. A lot of these I have never heard before, Neil. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
No, thank you for letting me wax lyrical about my favorite writer.
It was a joy. It was a pleasure. I'm losing composure now, so we gotta cut me off. So at this point in the show, can you let everybody out there know what's Talking Scared doing the rest of the year? Who's on the docket coming up? What do you have planned?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me have a look at my schedule. So which is always open. So by the time this goes out, I will have just put live an episode with Tanana Reeve-Dew, who is, I think, the foremost practitioner of Black contemporary horror. And she's written a novel called The Reformatory, which is set in the 50s in Florida in this horrendous, haunted juvenile detention facility. It's actually based on a real tragedy from her own family history. But if you like King, you will love this book. It has that, I even say that in the outro, it has that same texture of something like Shawshank and The Body. Even when it's about horrible things, it's got this casual, anecdotal writing style that is just lovely. And it's a great conversation. The week before that, I spoke to Nat Cassidy, who is an even bigger King fan than me, uber King nerd. And he just wrote a book called Nestlings, which is his take on Salem's Lot. And it's very, very good. But going forwards, I've got a small press writer called Tyler Jones, who's coming on the show with quite a different episode because he's written a book called Midas, which is actually only limited release. So not everyone can get their hands on it. But I want to talk about it because it's a book that is rooted in, this sounds really dark, but it's a joyous conversation, but it's rooted in the fact that his son is quite profoundly disabled and does not have a very, very long life expectancy. And he wrote a book to come to terms with that. And it's a really beautiful conversation. It's hard to hear in parts, but it's about life, not death, you know? And then going forwards, I've got like just a host of great authors. Luke Dumas, who's written Haunted Museum ghost dinosaur novel called The Paleontologist. C.S. Humble, who's written a trilogy of weird westerns that have been sort of compared to Comp McCarthy and Larry McMurtry. Gemma Amor, who is a friend of mine, British author, who's got a new Cornish Gothic novel coming out called The Folly. Then I do a whole thing. Oh, then I've got Michelle Paver, who wrote the classic Dark Matter, the Arctic horror novel. And then I do a thing called The State of the Horror Nation, where I do a recap over the best books we've all loved this year with some guests. The Ghost Story Deep Dive. And into next year, I mean, I've got Chuck Palahniuk coming on the show, Stephen Graham Jones coming back on the show, Gwendolyn Keist. I'll probably have Paul Tremblay back on the show, and he has a new book out. Dean Koontz is coming on in the summer.
Oh,
talk about his career. So yeah, a lot of things to cover going forwards. But I like to speculate with lesser known names too.
You'll be busy.
I'm taking a short break in the new year because I need one. I've done an episode every week since September 2020. So I need some time off. But then I'll be back and stronger than ever.
Neil, I bow down. Oh man, I'm working on increasing my pace a little bit. During COVID, I was doing a book a week because I had the time to do it, but I've slowed down a skosh.
Yeah, well, King books are pretty big as well. It's quite hard to do under the dome in a week, right? When you've got other things in your life. When you can leave your house, it's quite difficult to read The Stand in a week. But yeah, no, good luck with it.
Thank you once more for Oh, my heart is just so moved. This was just such a great, great experience. Thank you for coming on here and sharing your love of King and really bringing a lot of amazing insight. I feel like I just attended an awesome lecture. I really am walking away from like a seminar very changed. So thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me. It's been an absolute delight.
Take care.
Cheers.
How much did you love that, everyone? Hopefully your heart is just as melted as mine. Wow. Don't you just want to clap? I most certainly do after I wipe the tears off my cheeks. Thank you so very much to Neil for being so generous with his time and really taking these interview questions out of the cosmos. His king wisdom and passion are completely electric, and they inspire me to the 10th power. I hope that Neil and I can get together in future for more Dark Tower related content because I'm ready, guys. I'm ready to get back to Roland and the quartet, and for what's coming, I know I'm gonna need some intellectual and emotional support, but in all honesty, I embrace it. I'm looking forward to it, whatever happens. At the heart of it, I know Ka is a wheel, and that's gotta count for something. Please visit the links in the show notes for all things Talking Scared. And please make sure you spend some time with Neil's articles because they really are the cat's pajamas. I love his perspective, and of course, make sure you're subscribed to Talking Scared. I think Neil's literary opinion may be the only one we need going forward. Also, be sure to prioritize, if you haven't already, the Mike Flanagan interview, which makes me swoon, and of course, Mr. Stephen King's interview, which is the best I've ever heard. All right, loves. Now that we're coming back down to earth, I do have a bit of bad news. Unfortunately, my Salem's Lot episode is going to be postponed until most likely next year. I know, I'm sorry. I'm really gutted, but I was at the end of my read-through, and with my work schedule and everything on my plate, it was not coming together the way I wanted. I really ran out of time, and I didn't want to rush it and give a less than stellar overview of Salem's Lot. No way, Jose, that was not an option. So I made a choice, and the choice was to put it on the back burner until I have more time to plug in with not only Salem's Lot, but the short stories Jerusalem's Lot and One for the Road, because as you all know, they're all connected, and we need to explore them all together, in my humble opinion, and I was just not in a spot to make it happen. But next year, guys, we'll get back to Barlow and Stryker, and it's gonna be awesome. Okay, what you all can look forward to is my next episode, which will be 1974's Carrie. I'm nearly finished with it. It is my very first time reading it, ever. And I've got a lot of feelings, my guys. My goodness. There is a lot of power, darkness, and intensity in this little story. But that will definitely be our next episode, so if you want to do a quick reread to sync up with me, I recommend, because I promise, Carrie is our next episode. I'm really excited. It's going to be heavy, but it's going to be good, and I totally feel it's meant to be. November is an amazing month to talk about Carrie. Without sounding too woo-woo quackadoo, I do on occasion subscribe to astrological forecasts, and November has a lot of dark energy floating around, so if you're feeling particularly rageful, it's actually normal. We're gonna have a good time talking about Miss Carrie White. That will lead us to the end of the episode, dear ones. If you are new to the show, I hope you stay a while, click around, explore, and share it with a Stephen King fan in your life. I also hope you subscribe, rate, and review the show. And if you haven't already, please say hello at underratedsk@gmail.com. I respond to listeners often, and it's so great to hear your thoughts on the show, past episodes, learn about your reading history with King, as well as your personal recommendations. King fans are the definition of rad and so smart, so it's terrific interacting with all of you, so please say hello. It really makes me smile. You can also find the Year of Underrated Stephen King on Instagram, X, Threads, Facebook, and I think that's about it. I'm answering messages on those platforms as well, so please feel free to reach out on whatever branch you choose. Your listenership and messages help me pull the plow on this little show, so any communication is greatly appreciated. Wherever you are in the world, please take care as winter is coming. It may in fact already be there where you're at, so bundle up if it's chilly, and I'll talk to you all very soon. Bye-bye.